Our panel, welcome to it. The title, of course, Representation Matters, Diversifying the Newsroom. And in case you're wondering, wherever you are all across the world, why it matters, here's a short video primer for you.
DW has been in the business of international broadcasting since 1953. And throughout its history, multiculturalism has been at the heart of what we do here. But diversity management is about much more than acknowledging the rich backgrounds we all bring to the fore. Let me share some of the things we do to achieve our goal of becoming the most diverse and inclusive news organization in Germany. We are setting clear goals to move into the future, taking everyone on board. These include taking stock of where we're actually at with our 32 broadcasting languages and over 140 nationalities that build the backbone of all our operations. In order to move forward and become leaders in diversity, we are implementing certain strategies. Among other things, we've recently joined a program championed by the BBC called 50-50, the Equality Project. Here, we monitor the representation of genders in our content using data and other tools to set benchmarks on the way to our vision, which is equal representation. We are also aiming to understand the needs from all our employees pertaining to their diverse backgrounds so we can better identify where we need to focus our energies. We have in-house events to educate all our staff about the many dimensions of diversity we want to honor. Be that our transgender staff members, those with visible or invisible disabilities, or those who have a lot of candles on their birthday cakes. The first step is to become aware of the automatisms we all have, whether in our own heads or in our systems. Awareness raising, feedback, training, and structural changes are key. And consistent monitoring. Because providing unbiased information is at the heart of our mission. So we have to constantly scrutinize our own unconscious biases. We want to break through barriers of privilege and power. We want to communicate openly and with respect. You may know that DW is an acronym for Deutsche Welle, meaning German wave, as in radio waves. But for me, DW stands for one thing above all. DW means diverse world.
So as you can tell, Deutsche Welle doing a lot, but what you see sitting here is still a white man, me, not that young anymore. So maybe you could say the prototype of an, well, aging white man, and I'm the head of news of Deutsche Welle. So when I was asked to host this panel in the beginning, I was like, maybe I'm not the right person to do that. I'm kind of part of the problem, am I not? But at the same time, I want to be part of the solution, and definitely not part of the problem are our guests today. You can see him here in the background behind me. We have with us today Elif Shafak, the award-winning British-Turkish novelist. She tells stories that often have gone unheard until she tells them, and you can see the connection to diversity there. And then also with us, Kheira Tami is with us. She's the executive producer, or one of the executive producers at AJ Plus Français, and she's leading one of the most diverse teams at that organization. So very glad to have you both with us today, and I would like to start with Kheira. Tell me, as a white man, why should I diversify our newsroom?
I think that it's actually cool that you're already aware that you have to diversify your newsroom. That's really important. I think it's important to diversify the newsroom, not only you, but all people who are leading newsrooms all over the world. It's just because if you have a diversified newsroom, you can talk to everybody. And that's our mission, to be able to tell stories to everybody, from the leaders to random people, So this is why, it's a big challenge to be able to diversify newsrooms. So we can tell a wide range of stories.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Understood, Kheira. So wide range of stories, talk to many people, reach more people. But Elif Shafak, isn't that also a problem? If you try to reach so many different minorities, if I may put it that way, are you not in risk of losing the majority?
I think that's a brilliant question, and maybe it's going to be our challenge in the years ahead. But I think there are massive inequalities in our societies, and these inequalities matter. There are people who are not invited to the table when decisions are being made. And if we want a proper, better, fairer world, we have to care about not only diversity, but also inclusion. We need to care about who is being pushed to the margins, the periphery, who is being disempowered. I think inequalities matter, and they have political, social, cultural consequences. So it is actually also in the benefit of the majority in the long run if we have a fairer world. And for that, minorities, women, minorities of all backgrounds need to be included in the public space, in the public decisions, but also in the decision-making processes.
Of course, when we talk about diversity, it's not only about gender diversity, it's about ethnic diversity, sexual orientation. There are all kinds of aspects to this topic. But Elif Shafak, let me get back to you about one thing, because we talked about this before this broadcast here. You said that we are witnessing that everybody sort of go back into their own tribes. We recognize everybody there's all in their bubble, and that this is a danger to the whole of democracy. But aren't we supporting this if we put too much focus on different minorities and, like I said earlier, lose the bulk of the population?
I think there's a direct relationship between the preservation of democracy and respect for diversity. I come from a country, Turkey, that has never appreciated its diverse heritage. And I think by losing that, we have lost a lot.
Turkey, that is, right?
If I may give you another example. Turkey has, relatively speaking, regular elections. Turkey is not a democracy. Russia has elections. Russia is not a democracy. I am by no means underestimating the importance of the ballot box. But all I'm saying is, in itself, having elections is not enough to have a democracy. For a proper democracy to exist, we need rule of law, separation of powers, free media, independent academia, women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights. Together with all these components, a democracy can survive. So it is in our benefit, to our benefit. We all benefit from a proper functioning democracy. For that to happen, we need minority rights.
Back to you, Kheira Tami. In concrete steps, how can we diversify newsrooms?
I think we should start, from the beginning, from training, open schools when we talk about diversity, as you said, it's not only like, ethnicity or sexual orientation or gender. It's also like social background. I mean, students from working class should be able to enter school of journalism. It should be open to them and easy to enter. This is really important because, in mainstream media, I'm talking about France because this is, this is what I know. It's my country, so I can talk about it. So in France, for instance, the school of journalism are very elitist. Not everybody can enter a school of journalism. Now they've started, like Sciences Po in Paris, they've started to understand they need to open up to minorities, to people who are coming from suburbs, for instance. And their program, they have special program, it's working, it's starting, to work. We have, for instance, in our newsrooms, people who benefited from this program, who are coming from suburbs, in France, and were able to enter Sciences Po and become journalists. So I think it starts from this point, from the training. There's another thing also that newsrooms should be aware of. They should open up, We've noticed that lately with all the, the Arab Spring, for instance, where you had a lot of citizen journalists. a lot of people, who were not like in journalism, were not interested in journalism, but were able to document what was going on, in their environment, what was going on around them. And a lot of these people ended up, working in newsrooms. It happened, for instance, in Al Jazeera, where I work. So this is also a step, in, opening more newsrooms.
I have a couple of questions on that, actually, Kheira, because you're touching upon some very crucial and interesting points there. But first of all, understood, journalists should have all kinds of backgrounds, but shouldn't they all have in common that they know how to be journalists, to be balanced, to learn the craft of journalists? And can you make sure that this actually happens if you have such a diverse newsroom?
Of course. I mean, when you have to carry on like training, when you get, like citizen journalists, for instance, in your newsroom, you have to train them because they don't have, as you said, all the proper training, let's say, if we can call it like this way. So you have to, when you get them in your newsroom, you have to train them and to empower them. And it's the same with, when you get like a diverse newsroom, when you have like, people from different ethnicity, it's cool, okay, you can, show it off, but what are you doing after that? Okay, you recruited them, what are you doing after? Are you empowering them? Are they advancing in your company? Are they in a management position, for instance? So that's something, that can be done inside the newsroom. We can train, people who are not journalists, but we would need them because, they have this experience that some journalists don't have, of the field. They have a, different story, and they can also empower your newsroom.
Understood. Thank you very much. By the way, we are joined now by another panelist, Ellen Ehni, who's the TV editor-in-chief of the German national public broadcaster WDR. Ehni, thank you very much, Ellen Ehni, to be with us. She strives to make programs for the entire population. She once said that in an interview with Deutsche Welle. So I would like to hand it over to her right away with the question, are you making programs for the entire German population?
Well, sorry for joining a little bit later. We had some technical problems, so I didn't unfortunately hear what my predecessor said. But I think we try very hard to make programs for the entire population. That's, by the way, what our the law says for our focuses of our programs that we have to deliver. And I think it's very important to stress out two topics. First of all, diversity has several dimensions. I'm not sure if that has already been said, but of course there's cultural and ethnic diversity, which is very important and which is certainly some point that we need to work on. But there are several other dimensions of diversity that I want to see respected in our programs as well, which is like gender, age, religious background, education, income. They are all unchangeable, and since we want to be there for the whole population, we need to make program for all these diverse people. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how can we get there? Is a diverse team a way to go there? Of course, we need to pay attention to the fact that our teams need to be more diverse, but I think it's necessary but not sufficient. We need to work on the fact that everybody in WDR, in my department where I work, has in mind that he has a personal background, and I have blind spots too. I am a mother with 2 kids in this position that I own right now, chefredakteurin, so that is already a diverse step, but I'm not like as diverse as all dimensions of diversity. So I'm working with my staff very hard on the fact that we have to be aware of the blind spots, and we have to listen to other people who have different stories, who have different international background, and really try to incorporate that in our daily doing when we try to find topics, when we try to find people to interview. And I encourage very much my staff to be mutig. I don't find my
courageous,
words. Like
brave.
To dare new ideas. courageous, thank you, to dare new ideas and to perhaps find people that have not been on TV before, and we don't know if they'll be able to speak on TV, but we'll try it and we'll perhaps make mistakes. But I encourage my staff to go to leave the trodden paths, as you say, and to try new things. And everybody in my team is very much encouraged to do so. Just one last example. I don't know if you know the ARD Presseclub, which is a TV show screened on Sunday, and it's journalists talking about the topic of the week. And the staff stayed the same. It's like one person who plans that with some colleagues. But we try to find more diverse people, more diverse journalists going there, podcasters, not only journalists from like the traditional newspapers, more women, more cultural diversity. And that already works quite well, even though the staff stayed the same.
Thank you very much, and Ehni, and good to have you with us, even if you were late. It's very important. You're an important addition, of course, to this panel. I would like to throw it back to Elif Shafak on what Kheira said earlier. Do you think everybody should be a journalist or should have the possibility to be a journalist?
Everybody has the possibility or the potential to become a journalist. Of course, it's a process, it's a learning process, but I think more there's a core principle that I want to emphasize. I think we all need to become engaged citizens, involved citizens. We're living in an age in which we cannot assume that history or time always goes forward in a linear way. We have seen that time sometimes goes backwards, that countries can slide backwards, such as what's happening in my motherland, Turkey. And I think if it is true that countries can go backwards and tumble into ultranationalism, religious fundamentalism, populism, and populist authoritarianism, I believe we women need to be more alert and more aware of the dangers of losing democracy. Because when countries go backwards, the first rights that will be curbed will be women's rights and minority rights. So everybody should become more engaged and involved citizens, but especially women need to be bigger defenders of democracy. Especially minorities have to become bigger defenders of democracy. We have much more to lose when democracy is lost.
So what you're saying, Elif Shafak, is that if I diversify the newsroom of Deutsche Welle, this will help democracy and it will help counter populism. Is that correct?
I think diversity is a crucial element, not only diversity, but inclusion, inclusive diversity, having more egalitarian spaces, hearing the voices of people who have been unheard, paying attention to the periphery, not only to the center. In other words, paying attention to inequalities, plural, gender inequality, racial inequality, ethnic inequality, regional inequalities, but also digital inequalities. We're living in a world in which is digitally divided. So paying this attention to all these inequalities will strengthen our democracies, but will also help us to understand the causes, the rise of populist movements, and to come up with better alternatives. Because populism is a phony answer to some very real problems. The problems are real, but it's an illusion is the argument that populism will solve them. It won't. It will make things worse. If I may add this very quickly, journalism matters and journalism is under attack. When it is lost, when the ecosystem of democracy is lost, what we end up with is not democracy, it's majoritarianism. From majoritarianism into authoritarianism, it's a very quick slide backwards. So I think we need to understand that democracy is a delicate ecosystem of checks and balances. And journalism, as well as diversity and inclusion, are a big part of sustaining that ecosystem in a healthy way.
Kheira Tami, I would like to throw it back to you because, as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had the chance to build a team basically from scratch, right? From the beginning. Now, what Ellen Ehni and also myself are facing is that we have crews, teams that have been around for a while, and that, first of all, you don't necessarily want to get rid of, right? Because they've done good work in the past. And second of all, labor laws and all that, these people have earned a place and you cannot just fire them, right? So what do you do? And this is, I'm asking you, Kheira, on this. What do you do if you have the people you have, you know, and you have to work with these people, and it happens to be people that are predominantly white and probably also predominantly male in some cases. So how do you make sure that there is this cultural change and they understand how important diversity is in the programs, for example?
Yeah, I don't know if I can ask you answer this question because you know, I'm working for a digital media, so I mean most of the team is very young, so I've never faced, you know, this issue. But what I would do if I would have, you know, like this case, you know, in my team, I would just make sure that, you know, they mingle with, you know, they are in an environment that is very diversified there, where you have, you know, like people with different views, with a different way of telling stories. I would just make sure that, you know, they mingle and they talk to each other, they communicate, because it's very important to communicate. And, you know, just make sure that, you know, they manage to work together. I mean, this is what I would. I don't know if it's the right answer. If I'm answering your question.
I think there are no wrong answers here, but we need input on this. And I would like to give it over to Ellen Ehni, because I think that's exactly what you are dealing with, right?
Yes, Mark, you described it very, very well. We have a staff here which we don't want to get rid of. And by the way, we can't get rid of. So we have to work on the change of the mindset of the staff that we have. I can relate to Kheira and to Elif at that point, because I think one very important rule is that there is kind of a herd instinct inside teams that have been working together for a long time. They have a topic and then they discuss it always in the same way. And that's the first break-in where you have to say, no, why do you always follow what this one said or what this newspaper wrote? Let's really look at it from the other side. And how can you get there with existing staff that is the way it is? We are working on some new workflows at this moment because, for example, we have a very powerful and efficient diverse team here, WDR4U, which was launched in 5 years ago, 2016. And it's a really culturally very different team. And they discuss a lot about which topics should be tweeted. And we all need this discussion. If we want to get rid of what we've already done and we've done for ages, we want to have a new look on things, we need this discussion. And I'm cordially inviting WDR4U, like one people, to come to other teams, come to their discussion rounds, come to their conferences when they try to find the topics that they want to cover, and really change the way and the perspective you look at a topic. I think that's a very important point to change the mindset. And something that Elif said, I'm really full of respect for her work, for work of journalists in difficult countries. I mean, no comparison to what my staff does here in Cologne. But of course, we have correspondents in Russia, we have correspondents in Africa, and we have difficult conditions of work. I think everywhere we need to respect the quiet people, the people that are not already heard by the big newspapers, by the big headlines, the people who perhaps look at some developments and ask themselves, okay, why does someone says this and the other one says that? Is it only black and white, or is it perhaps a lot more complicated? And we need to listen to those voices that are not black or white, but somewhere in gray, because our situation, our political development is so complex. And I'm working on that as well with my teams. Listen to the quiet, listen to those who are not as loud as the others, and then you can have a very different look on things.
And Ehni, I need to get back to you on one incident that happened in Germany this year. I'm sure not everybody is aware of it, but it was a big discussion in Germany. There's a show called Die letzte Instanz, which translates loosely as the last authority in Germany, where racism was discussed. And it was discussed by 5 white people. And that's what caused basically the uproar in Germany. I think we're all in agreement that understandably so. Now, my question to you, Ellen Ehni, is how can something like that still happen nowadays? That's a basic question. You know, which mechanisms do you have to change, or can you change in order for something like that to be avoided in the future?
That was really a horrible accident, if I may say so, and the person responsible for the TV show already said her excuses to everybody. We all completely agree in WDR that this is a show that should have never taken place. And you ask the right question: how is it possible that the editorial staff who was responsible for this show was not conscious about what was going on? And this has been aired in November. No one realized, no one reacted to it. And then it has been aired a second time in February. And then someone watched it, and then someone talked about it and made it become public in some ways. And we looked at ourselves and we said, okay, we really need to take care that in the editorial staff, that there's a conscience of what topic are we talking about and who needs to be talking about it. And we started since then a diversity Arbeitsgruppe. I know that's a terrible word, but we got connected with everybody who has to treat these topics. And that's where, for example, WDR for You comes in. Some of these colleagues will go to the responsible for TV shows, for entertainment, for journalistic programs, and say, okay, which questions do you not have in mind because you're white, because you're well educated, because you live in a big city? We really need to be a lot more aware of this. And I can tell you that everybody here, including the direction of the WDR channel, are working on it, and we take this very seriously. I, for myself, in my department, I take this work very seriously, and I will do everything that something like this doesn't happen again.
Do you have advice, for people listening, might be running newsrooms across the world right now? What's the one concrete thing, detailed thing you did about this? A person you talked to, and what did you say?
As I just said, we need to work on different levels. In conferences, sometimes I myself take the position of being against something, just to make it possible to look at a topic from another perspective. When everyone agrees and says, oh yeah, we need to do it this way, and that's the story to tell,
then something's wrong.
Then I take the opposite position, and I encourage my people to do it. Just we're sure we really ask every question about a topic. Second of all, I try to change the mindset by talking to more diverse people, to experts, to people who already work for WDR, to freelancers who work for us. And we actually profit of something that the WDR has done for a long time already. For example, with WDR Grenzenlos, which is a young program to encourage young journalists to come to WDR. More than 100 people already did it in the past years, and some of them already work in really prominent positions here. And third of all is the full staff that you already said needs to be more diverse. When older white people retire, then of course we try to make our teams more diverse. Actually, now we employ about 20% of the new people coming in already have an international history, as you say nowadays, and we will be working on this to be more diverse in every kind of dimension as soon as we can replace the fixed staff and the full staff that will go on retirement.
Elif Shafak, you've been listening to a lot of journalist stories now in the journalist perspective. What can we, the journalists, learn from you when it comes to diversifying the newsroom as a novelist?
I appreciate that question. I think as a writer, of course, I love stories, I love language and words, but I'm equally interested in silences. So it's not only stories, but silences and people who have been silenced that I am interested in. And that's something where I think our words overlap, because journalism does storytelling and should do storytelling, because When you do storytelling, it is so much more powerful. Then it's not only about numbers, it's not only about statistics. If I know the stories of refugees, if I know the stories of minorities, if I know the stories also of white working class people whose voices are not heard, you know, all those unheard and untold stories, then I think journalism becomes not only more powerful, but emotionally more moving. What you said reminded me earlier, the example you gave about, you know, white people discussing racism on German TV. In Turkey, it happens all the time. We see male speakers, always panels composed of male speakers, usually conservative male speakers, talking about women's rights or violence against gender. That kind of breaking those glass walls is incredibly important. If I may quickly add, I think I make a distinction between information, knowledge, and wisdom. I think we're living in an age in which we are bombarded by information, and it creates an information fatigue. It creates an apathy, numbness. We need less information, but more knowledge, and ultimately more wisdom. So for knowledge, we need books. We need investigative journalism, slow journalism, in-depth analysis. We need to go within, you know, just slow down a little bit. But for wisdom, ultimately, I think we need to bring the mind and the heart together. We need empathy, we need emotional intelligence. And these are the areas in which we can constantly learn from each other as writers and journalists.
If I may, my feeling is that the path to go, what you describe, is fairly long. And I'm going to tell you why. There's a discussion also in Germany about gender-neutral speech. Right? And that's significantly more difficult in German than it is in English. And I see Ellen Ehni on the right side here smiling a little bit because she knows about this, right? So there is a minority, it's a significant minority, but a minority in Germany who thinks this is extremely important to do this, right? But then you have about 70% of the population who say this is ridiculous. So how do you deal with that? Because you cannot, and that brings me back to where I was going earlier, if you don't connect with the majority anymore, then what is all of this worth? And this is a question to you. Again, Elif Shafak.
I think as a writer, I do know that words can heal, but words can also hurt. Words matter. You know, the darkest chapters in human history did not start with concentration camps or neighbors putting X marks on each other's doors, or, you know, mass movements. I think the darkest chapters in human history started with words. How we talk about the other matters. What kind of words do we choose? Derogatory words, seemingly unimportant, they matter. So I think as human beings, we need to be open to learning from each other. But what you're saying is so important, this friction between majority and minorities. And I think it's very important for us to understand that this is not a zero-sum game. For instance, where there is patriarchy, of course women suffer, but I think men also suffer. Where there's patriarchy, women are unhappy, but I think men are unhappy as well. So if we can smash patriarchy, a much more egalitarian system will also be good for men. I think it's important for us to explain that this is not a zero-sum game. A better society, a fairer society, a more inclusive society will be also good for the majority.
And we have time for one more question. I would like to throw it over to Kheira Tami. Let's say you have a white man like myself working in your newsroom, and he pays lip service to diversifying it and says, yes, this is important, everything. But then in the evening, you go and have a wine on the Paris terrace, right? And then he says, I think this is all not really working, and it's those visions are never going to come true. What do you tell that person? How do you try to convince that person that diversity in the newsroom is super important?
But I mean, diversity in the newsroom, I mean, it will not happen in one day. I mean, you know, it takes time. The things that more and more people and men, as you are aware of it, I think it's also a step. Now, I think we start slowly with the, you know, we're seeing it. I'm seeing it with the new generation. It's way much more like diversified than it used to be 10 years ago, for instance, just 10 years ago. I mean, if you watch at the news, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have like that, you know, like people of color, you know, Black people, minorities, either presenting the news bulletin or, you know, being sent like as correspondent, or you didn't have this 10 years ago on a French media outlet. Now it's starting slowly, you know. We are seeing, like, minorities are seeing people who look like them on TV, are reading people, you know, who somehow, you know about this story, you know, they share something, you know, journalists that they can relate to. They are reading, they are listening. And so I think it's changing. It will not happen in one day. This, you know, as you said, you know, you have like people who are like in the newsroom who are still, you know, not retired. It will take time. I mean, This will never happen in one day. But we are, you know, with all what happened lately with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the Me Too movement, you know, things are like, it gave a push, you know, it gave us a push and an alert, like it's time, like, to change. It's time for newsroom, you know, like it's a wake-up call. We have to change. We know what to change. So now, you know, we've started, and I think we are on a good way. I mean, we have to be positive. And I just wanted to add something. You know, Dutch Welle is an international media outlet. You know, it's normal somehow that they have a diversity. What is important is that, you know, local media, like local newspaper, they also have, you know, they need diversity also. So because most people, you know, I think in Germany is the same, in France, they read, you know, their local newspaper, they listen to the local radio. Right. So there also we need diversity. It's really important to have diversity in this, not only in big newsrooms like ours, but also in local news outlets, media outlets.
Understood. So we still have a long way to go. That's what you said, Kheira Tami, but we've already made some progress. I would like to thank our three panelists for this discussion. Thanks for being with us today. Ellen Ehni, Elif Shafak, and Kheira Tami.